Welcome, everyone. Our webinar will begin shortly. So in the meantime, please let us know where you're from in the chat and check in. We'll get started in just a moment. Looks like we have an awesome group joining us today. For those of you coming in just now, we will begin shortly in a moment. So please do let us know where you're from in the chat. All right, looks like just about everyone is here. So welcome, everyone. My name is Nora McGinnis. I co-chair the Exhibitions Committee of the Surface Design Association, and we're a membership nonprofit focused on contemporary fiber and textile art. So we organize a number of exhibitions every year, and there are currently 2 open calls that I want to just briefly mention before our program begins. So first is our exhibition in print, which closes May 15th. And you'll see a link to that call pop up in the chat in just a moment. This year it's juried by Lorna Hamilton Brown, and it is open to non-members. So this exhibition is our fall journal. It's a full color publication reaching thousands of people across the US and internationally. And I just like to mention it is a really especially great opportunity for international artists because it comes without the worry of having to ship your work long distances. The second show that I want to mention is our 2023 members exhibition, Safekeeping. It'll be juried by Anita Fields and hosted by the really wonderful Gallery 108 Contemporary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It is closing in just a couple of days on April 1st, so do be sure to get your entries in. It is a members show, but if you're not yet a member and you do wish to join and submit your work, you can get 10% off membership today with the code Textile Talks as a thank you for coming and joining us. So with that, I'd like to welcome you to this week's Textile Talk, Future Tense 2023. We will be talking with our juror, Natalie Baxter, and award winners Esther Elia, Sevaan Perrow, and Emily Keown from this year's annual SDA student exhibition, which is currently on view at the Robert Hillestad Textiles Gallery at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Textile Talks webinars are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. A few housekeeping announcements as we get started. So as this is a webinar, your screens and mics are not visible to us, and we do welcome your questions, which we will answer at the end of all of the artist presentations. Please do submit those through the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen, and you can do that anytime throughout the program. We are honored to bring you free and inspiring Textile Talks programming, and we respectfully ask that you be courteous as you engage with speakers, moderators, and other participants, so your chat comments can be seen by everyone. With that in mind, please use the Q&A for questions, the chat box for greeting others, and the survey also located at the bottom of your screen for commentary or ways that we can improve Textile Talks. If during the presentations you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can click on that chat button to toggle the notifications on and off. Now I will turn things over to Michael Burton, director of the Robert Hillestad Textiles Gallery. So Michael is an assistant professor at UNL, a digital artist and a filmmaker. He creates historically based films with his partners in the Department of History and English at the University of Nebraska. His films have been funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, Maryland Humanities, and the Kitty M. Perkins Foundation. He received an MFA in painting in 2007 from UNL, and today he is joining us from inside the gallery to give us a first-hand view of the show. So thanks so much, Michael. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nora. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Burton. As Nora said, I'm the director of the gallery, and we're here in the Department of Textiles, Merchandising, and Fashion Design at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We are a Carnegie Research One institution, and we're the flagship university campus here in Nebraska. I'm joined today by Anna Coleman. Anna received her master's in material culture recently. She's a costume designer, and she's the gallery manager. And she's going to be wheeling us around as well. Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. I'd also like to thank the hard work of coordinating the show with Anna and Karina Bennett from SDA, Alicia Decker, and Nora McGinnis, who you just heard from. We're so pleased to host the 2013 Future Tense Fiber Art Juried Exhibition, and to be with you at the Textiles Talk today has great meaning for us. Juried exhibitions are really important. They foster a competitive spirit among artists. They hold us to high standards by virtue of peer review. And when you're accepted into one, it has great meaning. I want to share this with you. I show this to everyone when I do one of these shows. And these are all of my rejection letters from the last 22 years as an artist. I have acceptances too, believe me, but I have a lot of rejections as well. And the reason I show this to you is it represents the work that artists must do to share their work with the world. People don't come to us expecting us just to share our work. We have to go out and promote it and work for it. You'll not get into some shows, but those of you who are in this show got in, and we celebrate that. But when you do, it has great meaning, and this is a really competitive field. So congratulations to all of the artists. We had 330 entries with 19 accepted. That's a 17.5% acceptance rate. So it's highly competitive. And Natalie Baxter, thank you. You did a wonderful job selecting work for this show. Not an easy task. So I want all the artists to feel good about this acceptance, knowing that it has great meaning. A quick quote. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang, and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. And if you don't know where that came from, it's Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. But in this case, you did, so let's celebrate. In that spirit, I'm pleased to announce the first prize, the SDA Award of Excellence. It's an honorable mention to Gigi Gastovich, or Jane. It's this piece here. This piece was selected by our committee under blind review, and we unanimously selected Jane for several reasons. Jane is about memory and loss. Jane had early onset dementia. The pieces come in and out of focus as you walk through the space. And the temporal nature of this image is a metaphor for memory and loss in and of itself. The quality of the large scale cross stitches, they're about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick. Kind of makes this in and out of focus by nature of the medium itself, by changing the scale of the piece and the scale of the stitches and where you stand in space changes your perception of memory or this fragment in time. And it's a wonderful metaphor for something that is unfortunately tragic for many people in the world. So congratulations, Gigi, for the award for this show, and the show for Jane. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the juror for Future Tense 2023. Future Tense was juried by Natalie Baxter, MFA. Her work has been exhibited in galleries, museums, universities, and fairs internationally, with recent shows at Denny Dimon Gallery, both in New York and Hong Kong. the New York Historical Society, the Torrance Art Museum in California, Supermarket Art Fair in Stockholm. She has been an artist in residency at Mosaic Project, Stoveworks, a fellowship recipient at Vermont Studio Center. I've been there. I was not a fellowship recipient, so congratulations on that. Also very competitive. IASPIS grant recipient, and is twice awarded the Queen's Art Fund grant. Press for Baxter's work include the New York Times, the New Yorker, Hyperallergic, The Guardian, and Bomb Magazine. Thank you for all of your hard work, Natalie. We really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. And Michael, I love that what you're saying about how, like you don't always get chosen, and that's okay, because I sort of realized that being on the other side so much in the past of like, oh, why didn't I get into that? Or like so-and-so got into that. Why didn't, that's weird. But it's like, it totally depends on, the show and what works well together. And it's not always because your work is not up to par. So I like that you said that. And this was a very hard show to jury because there were so many wonderful pieces, but I was really trying to sort of see the themes that I saw from all of the work that people had applied with, and sort of see what fit well together. And it was interesting. I feel like for me, a lot of textile work in general has a lot to do with identity and with the self, whether that's like identity on a larger scale, like the piece that they just showed. I believe the artist, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Sevaan Perrow, this piece right here. Yeah. And anyway, sorry, you don't have to move it around, but this one, so sort of dealing with identity, like national identity on this more global scale, in this case in Taiwan. And then also some other work that was like more global. Was it or more like, yeah, the like welcome, the piece that's the Blake Ballard, also sort of this like general, this one right here, this like welcome piece, and the accompanying piece that was also Blake's other piece that was, I think it was like farewell or something. Anyway, and or like a very personal identity way, like Catherine Chundy's work, or some of these like pieces that you see there on the body. That's like one of them is like an anxiety suit, or one of them is like these like invisible monster piece. That's Sophia Nato. That's what her work, and or their work. And then yeah, just like identity, these issues of home, the body. And I also was looking to put a mix of sort of abstract work, such as this one, with more sort of representational work, and like a mix of scale and a mix of like what sort of worked well together. So like this piece is a very large abstract piece once it comes into focus. Yeah, and the pieces that I gave awards to, or maybe we're going to get to that later, but they sort of they kind of stayed with me as I kept going through a lot of the works. And so yeah, so that's I like these two are some of them that won pieces. I really was kept being drawn to them, and I think that that just visually they really worked well and are strong as a piece. These are more examples of sort of works dealing with the body and sort of like the physicality of it. I also really was trying to be cautious of getting a sort of breadth of different kinds of textile work. So there's some mixed media pieces, there's some that is sort of like painted onto fabric, there's some embroidery in here, there's some applique, some weaving, some felting. So lots of different variety of works. I believe this is painted on to textile, if I'm correct. Yeah, so that was sort of my thought in putting pieces together. It was sort of challenging. And I did choose some multiple pieces from the same artist, because I feel like it's nice to sort of see a variety of different works from the same artist together in a show. And some of them were drastically different from each other, that it sort of made sense. And this is using photography or printmaking. I'm not even sure which one that is, but with like this sort of embroidery element. And some are very like playful and it's very colorful, and this mix of that with like the piece you just saw, those like sort of black and white. So yeah, I was thinking about like what would pair well together and what was sort of this larger conversation. So yeah, congrats to everybody that's in the show. I think it looks really great. I'm very proud of it. And everybody should be proud of their work. And those who applied that didn't get in should also feel proud, because there was so much really good work to choose from, and it's really like it's dependent on who's choosing it and whose eye. Like I have a certain aesthetic and style that I like, but somebody else that you're applying to has a drastically different eye, and they're looking for different pieces. It's interesting. I'm curating another show that's going to be opening in Long Island in a couple months. And it's so interesting what I'm like noticing that I'm being drawn to in other people's work that I'm choosing from, because it's like really it comes back to what I'm interested in my practice, which is kind of interesting. It's like I'm exploring this, and like this is an artist exploring that in a drastically different way. And that's sort of why I'm drawn to their work. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this too. This was an honor and so much fun.
Thanks so much, Natalie. And thanks, Michael, for giving us a view into the space as well. So just as a reminder to everyone in the audience, you can also see detailed images of all of this work on the Surface Design Association's website. We do have the show up as a virtual show as well. So if there's a piece that you want to see in more detail, you can head over there and take a look. So now we are going to switch over and hear from both Natalie and 3 of our award winners from the show in more detail about their work. And then we will have a Q&A session at the end where you'll be able to ask questions and ask the things that you're curious about in their practices. So Natalie, I'll turn it back over to you to present your talk.
Sorry for seeing my whole screen here. Oh, where did it go?
Okay.
It's just looking up a cocktail recipe for a friend's birthday. Anyway, okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm so impressed that there's so many people here too, and from all over. I was reading in the chat where everybody's coming from. So that's really cool. My name is Natalie Baxter, and I am a textile artist, an artist that I usually say I'm an artist who works primarily in textiles, because I actually don't come from, like, education wise, I didn't study fiber art in my studies, undergrad or grad school. I did more video and filmmaking, but in my mind it's very much like subject matter related to what I do now. And I always like to start when I give a talk with this image right here. This is a quilt that my great-great-grandmother made. And then this next image is a quilt of me and my grandmother with the very first quilt that we made together. I like to show these because I like to show that I come from this like long lineage of quilt making women. So that predominantly from Kentucky, that's where I'm originally from. I'm talking to you today from upstate New York. I live in a little town north of the city called Wassaic, which is where there's an artist residency that everybody should check out. Anyway, I feel like the fact that this skill and these skills that I have that I use in my work now come from this long line of women really sort of plays into my work a lot in subject matter. Anyway, so the first series that I did of using fabric was this series I call Warm Gun. So unfortunately this work continues to become a little bit more relevant every so often, especially this week in the wake of this Nashville shooting. But the work is really exploring America's fascination and sort of comfort with assault rifles. So using a very colorful fabrics, very like floral, flamboyant fabrics, and turning them into these soft sculpture weapons that are very droopy and sort of almost like caricatures. I'm using humor to sort of explore these issues of gender and it's like comfort with guns that America has, and sort of looking at it through this lens of humor. I feel like with a lot of my work, soft sculpture inherently has this sort of element of playfulness and like comedic element that sort of makes more difficult political like issues easier to tackle. So you first see sort of these weapons that are you see this like soft, funny thing, and you're sort of entering into it with humor, and then sort of able to dissect a sort of darker side of our country, or a darker side of society. So yeah, so that's my warm gun sculptures. And then I did this series of flags too. This one was a piece that I made after the 2016 elections. It's called America Current Mood. So again, like very colorful, very fun, very like this, very like yeah, looking at sort of this like bloated version of the American flag, which is like the symbol that that we use as our, you know, as our symbol of our country, and how it can sort of take on these different meanings and these different sort of personas depending on who is in power. This is a piece, you guys have probably seen this cartoon on the left. So sort of this like severed snake. And this piece is called Severed and Growing. Like, are you growing together? Are you growing apart? It's a giant flag that's predominantly red on one side and predominantly blues patchwork on the other side. And then this next series, this is an article. So Glenn Beck, he's this conservative radio host, wrote an article for his website that was about me and my gun work. So sort of being like, look at this artist in Brooklyn making these gun sculptures. Aren't they so ridiculous? And I took sort of the comment section of that and turned them into these banners that sort of echo those like banners you would see in a church, but then also sort of like these banners that you might see used. This one's used in like the suffragette movement. So like this one was like the epitome of like as I feel like the article was very like, this is Natalie, like, look at this woman making these gun sculptures, isn't it so ridiculous? And the comment section was like attacking me, my gender, my sexuality, my role as a woman, my like one of the comments was, clearly Natalie Baxter's confused about her role as a woman. So sort of like yeah, like attacking me in this like intense way for making sculptures of guns. And I saw it as like a lot of what I was exploring with gender and sort of gun ownership, of like, what is up with these predominantly men, like really tying their identity to gun ownership. And so it was like, then that like aggression was sort of being targeted back at me in the comment section. So yeah, these are some examples of banners that were quilted and made by suffragists like over 100 years ago, fighting for equality and the right to vote. So sort of like see it as like a contemporary nod to like, oh, we're still fighting in this way. These are some more examples of installation shots of the pieces installed. Some eagles, some money, which was sort of out of actually I'm gonna skip over that because I think that I don't have much time. This is a show in Pennsylvania. So this is all of like the guns, the eagles, the banners that I call alt caps, and the flag sort of like interacting together as an installation. And then during the pandemic, I was doing a residency in Wassaic, which is actually where I now live. So I moved up here, but I was sort of exploring these like roles that you take on that like at the time mostly women were sort of quitting their jobs to take on these caregiving roles. And I also had a child at the time, so sort of like trying on these different identities that sort of like weigh you down as a caretaker, as a homemaker, and also sort of realizing. So my grandmother, the one I showed you in the second picture, she would always put on a house coat to do sort of duties of the home. So I see it as this like homemaker workwear, you know, so this like giant thing that you put on, it like covers your body, you become like a shapeless being, but it also has all these like it's used like as a utilitarian thing, but I'm sort of like referencing these women of the past, including my grandmother, of like all of these different sort of layers that you put on as a woman of like trying to like do multiple things, I guess. And also how like the weight of that can sort of weigh you down. So if you were to actually wear one of these, like this one, for example, super heavy, very hard to do anything in it. And this, I'm sort of referencing this sort of fad that, or like this style of quilting using jeans, which was usually like my grandmother used to make quilts like this, where they're like, you would take your husband's old workwear and repurpose it into a quilt. So it's like using this object and this like uniform of hard physical labor, and then actually doing the labor of quilting it into a piece. So then I'm also like adding this other layer of turning it into a house coat of like a thing that you would wear as this sort of like homemaker thing. And some of these are made out of like laundry baskets, and yeah, lots of layered collage pieces in there. Got really into using these bathing suit cover up too, that are like this, you know, those like spray, what is it, like airbrush t-shirts that you'd wear, like, I feel like in like North Florida, or that's in my mind, that's where they're a lot of them, but like this like facade of this like sexy body over this as like a cover up of like maybe a not so sexy body underneath. So that second quilt that I showed you in the second slide won first prize at the Letcher County Homemakers Club, which is in Kentucky, in Eastern Kentucky. So I've always sort of like carried around this ribbon, and I framed it because I was like, this feels like a big deal. So I started thinking about like during the pandemic, of like these different roles that women, mostly women or caretakers, have taken on as like how your life became very mundane, or like mine did. Like I found myself, hey, I'm actually like living this similar life that my grandmother was living. Like I'm in a rural area. I'm like cooking, cleaning, gardening, baking bread. And I sort of created these different ribbons as like a good for you. You're doing a good job, like as a sort of like congratulatory thing, but also this sort of like tongue-in-cheekness of like all of these multiple things that you take on in that role. I also create a lot of quilts, and sort of as like an afterthought, as like between series, I'll like create a quilt. But Mosaic Project was like, let's show your quilts. And I was like, oh, you can do that? I didn't really think that I could show those. I thought those were just my little craft thing, which is also another larger conversation of craft in the contemporary art world and what the difference is and how it fits in. And that's for another day. So yeah, and using these, again, like creating these objects of things that you use to do these sort of domestic labor things, but made out of this one again with the jeans. And yeah, this is sort of like taking those house coats and sort of dissecting them into these wall pieces. And then these are like more ribbons. This was from this time last year, I did a residency in Sweden, and I was using a lot of found textiles from different thrift stores and secondhand stores. So this is sort of like elevating the objects that were sort of like discarded objects from the home. And there's a few, like this one in here has, see these are domestic, or missiles, like nuclear weapons. And that was during when there's like a lot of threat of this sort of like nuclear war happening. Like this one too has that in there. When I was in Sweden, there was like all, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia kept threatening to use these nuclear weapons. And I was like thinking about how here we are, like there's like these things happening in the background of these like this like threat of nuclear war. And here you are still having to perform these sort of like, you know, sing Itsy Bitsy Spider to your kid, or like do the dishes, but like there's like sort of this like looming larger thing happening in the background, which the same could be said for like assault rifles and sending your child to school, and how you're like, you know, the threat of a school shooting is always in the background of your head, the back of your head, but like you still have to continue on with your day. I'm probably running out of time, so I'm going to go a little bit fast, but this is sort of the most recent stuff that I've been doing. I've been making these chairs that you see on the right, these like flat quilted chairs. And this is like an evolution. Like, so the piece on the left is a project that I did maybe like, I don't know, 2016. So a long time ago. And it's so funny because I was trying to do this soapbox of like a thing that you stand on, that you like, speak your piece or like say your thoughts or your ideas, and then maybe people listen to you, maybe they don't. But I like this idea of like a soapbox that you can stand on, but it like it's not actually going to support you. And same with this this stool in the middle. So while I was in Sweden, I was like, I want to make this stool, and I just kind of went with it. But it's a stool that barely stands up. It's a soft sculpture, so you can't actually sit on it. It can barely like support itself. And so then I moved on to these chairs. This is my studio here in Mosaic. So these like flat chairs that are sort of inviting you to like have a seat, like come pull up a chair, have a seat at the table, like this like sort of political rhetoric and this sort of like lip service that's said of like, oh yeah, we want to invite you to the table. We want you to have a seat. We want you to be a part of this. But it's like, do you really? Do you like are you like sort of like how during the pandemic, people like, oh, essential workers are like the backbone of our society or our culture, like, oh, like working women or working mothers, or we really want to support them. They're like the backbone of our economy or whatever, whoever. But it's like, okay, it's just lip service. You're just saying that, you're not like actually doing anything to make a change or to support them in any way. So this, again, I'm using these like domestic textiles and these sheets and these curtains to create these like objects, that these seats that are like inviting you to sit down, but you actually cannot sit in them. So yeah, I'm like pushing again now, playing a lot more with found textiles and these bed sheets, and they're very fun. So that is me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Natalie. It's really awesome to get a view into your practice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So next we're going to hear from 3 more of our award winners from the show. So first I want to introduce Esther Elia, our first place award winner for her piece Muscle Suit. So Esther is an Assyrian-Irish artist from Turlock, California, currently living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She received her BFA in illustration at California College of the Arts and is currently finishing her MFA in painting and drawing at the University of New Mexico. Her work explores the Assyrian identity and diaspora through the interdisciplinary interdisciplinary practice that uses large-scale paintings, sculpture, and textiles to tell contemporary Assyrian stories. So Esther, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, so happy to be here. So yeah, I'm in Albuquerque right now. There is a snoring dog in the room. So if you hear noises like that, that's what it is. So I make work about the Assyrian identity, and we are a currently stateless people group from Southwest Asia or the Middle East, and our indigenous homelands are at the intersection of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. And a lot of people don't know about us or have heard about us in like ancient art history classes, and so I always like to just show that who we are, where we come from. And this is a picture of my family in our homeland having a picnic by Lake Urmia in Iran. And it's one of my favorite pictures in a series of pictures of Assyrians on picnics. And they are always sitting on Persian rugs or posing with Persian rugs. And
hey, Esther, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you please lean in a little closer to your microphone and speak a little louder? I'm getting comments that people are having trouble hearing.
yes.
Thank you.
Is this better?
Yes.
At all? Okay. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. This is my family having a picnic in our homeland by Lake Urmia in Iran. And there's like a whole series of pictures in my familial archive of them sitting on Persian rugs, having picnics, posing with them. And I just say that because the Persian rug was my first love affair with textiles. I grew up with them in the home, and they're definitely a part of my own personal aesthetic. More recently, I have been really into our ancient deities. This is in the British Museum, which is where a lot of them are stored at the moment. A lot of our ancient deities feature predators or powerful animals like the eagle or lion or bull, and combine them with human features and sometimes other animal elements to create a chimera. And so the Lamassu here is a bull and an eagle and a human. One of my favorite things about the ancient Assyrian style was the attention to musculature. It's really intense and detailed, and a really important feature of the ancient Assyrian art aesthetic. So I've been thinking about deities and muscles and started making my own diaspora deities to protect Assyrians outside of our homeland and away from the land where our former deities were born. 80% of the Assyrian population was forced out of our homelands through genocide and war, and many of us are still in the first and second generation of that immigration. So these diaspora deities also feature predators and chimeras, but they wear bodybuilder competition bikinis and have blocky muscles that, for me, reference the grid of the Persian rug. The blockiness speaks to a loss of craft. Our Persian rugs of old had curves that almost defied the grid. And with the loss of land and the surrounding culture in that land, we start to lose access to our cultural practices. Our ways of expressing ourselves become less refined, and in a lot of ways we start from scratch, or I feel I have started from scratch. I also have been really interested in telling ultra-contemporary oral histories, in part because the Assyrian identity is seen in the public eye only as ancient. And so by telling current stories of Assyrians, I can start to push back against that. With that being said, I've seen a steady increase of Assyrian women participating in bodybuilding, posting pictures on Instagram, and winning competitions. I drew inspiration from them and thought that these new diaspora deities become the new type of fearsome creature, the female bodybuilder joining the ranks of the eagle, lion, and bull. I've explored several materials, as you can see, tiles, cement, paint, and canvas, and made this muscle suit to explore this concept further and give the chance for the wearer to be protected, strong, and give strength to others. It's sewn canvas and then painted with acrylic so that the structure is maintained. The muscles are stiff and powerful, and I see this as maybe a new type of traditional clothing for us, one that starts to represent our culture as we adapt to new places. And so this starts to tell our stories and could be something that we could wear to represent who we are in diaspora, and for me in the US. So that's my work. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks so much, Esther. That's really awesome. So next, I would like to introduce Sevaan Perrow, who is our second place award winner for Oregon, her piece Oregon. Sevaan is an interdisciplinary artist from rural Georgia. She earned a BFA in expanded forms from the University of Georgia and is currently an MFA candidate at the University of Kentucky. She works in a combination of fibers, sculpture, video, found objects, trash, and magic. So welcome, Sevaan.
Hi, thank you for having me. Okay. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep, looks
Okay.
great, thanks.
Great, yeah. Yeah, so I'm Sevaan. I just started my MFA last fall, or this past fall. And, you know, in my undergrad, I really didn't work with fiber very much at all. I kind of was making more like video, performance, installation, kind of like time-based ephemeral work. But I've always been like really, really attracted and excited about fiber and like its sculptural potential. Like it's so movable and malleable and like intuitive, but there's also these like really rich and beautiful histories to kind of engage in. So yeah, a few months ago, I got into my master's program and I was kind of just like, I'm gonna just like go fully into this direction and like experiment with object making and see where it gets me. So this was the first kind of like fiber piece that I've like seen to fruition. And it was really fun, experimental for me. My work is generally dealing with these ideas of like boundaries and like the space in between two things. So like, and what happens in that space, like what that exchange is. So specifically with this piece, it's kind of like dealing with the idea of the space between like beauty and ugliness, and specifically in the body. Like I see a lot of like beauty, but also like the body is also like grotesque in a bunch of like other like funny ways. I don't know. So it's kind of like exploring that space and looking at that exchange with this, but also like just really getting my hands on as many like handheld kind of like fiber textile processes that I could. So it's like stitched and beaded and embroidered and stuffed and like torn. And this is a view of the other side. Yeah, it's like I just did as much as I could, kind of just see like what that interaction is. Like what does one process look like with another or next to another, and how does that work in like a more spatial context? Yeah, and then this other piece is also in the show. This is definitely more, it's like along the same line of thinking about like boundaries, maybe more to do with like the link between the body and like furniture and animacy and inanimacy, and what that play looks like. I think there's also like a little bit of like playful, grotesque like beauty in this as well. And I'm seeing these like bodily, visceral forms crop up, as I always do. So I'm like exploring that and what that looks like in my practice. But yeah, this one felt really about like getting my hands on the felting process. So this is like a hand felted mattress pad, and then kind of it's been like formed into this kind of like blobby mass. And then there's like a sheet of plastic sewn on the bottom of it, and then these like organy intestinal forms out of spandex, and then a found bed spring. And so this was kind of about just like getting these materials next to like a found object and like presenting that problem for myself and seeing if I could resolve it or like not resolve it. I feel like that's like I feel like when I'm working, I'm always like bringing up questions for myself, and like sometimes I can answer them and sometimes I can't, and maybe the question just like goes on, and that's okay with me. I'm always learning. Yeah, so there's that one. And then this was another piece from last semester. It's like a larger scale. It's probably about like shoulder height on me, which I'm like 5'5"-ish, so like somewhere in there. Sculpture, and it's completely hand needle felted with a tufted base, and then also these like soft sculptural forms in the middle. I was kind of working with like similar themes of like boundaries, like physical and psychological, and then also bringing in some like personal mythology too. But this brought this like really interesting question up for me, which was like, so I was working with the styrofoam originally as just like a base, like I was just going to cover it with the felt and it was just going to like work in that way. But as I kept working with it, it became like another art material. And so I started like burning it with acetone and like scraping it out and like putting different adhesives on it and breaking it apart and seeing what kind of like textures and shapes I could get, and how it interacted with the other material. And it like brought up this question for me of like material hierarchy and like why we assign value to certain things and not to others. And like styrofoam specifically and like plastics are like so ubiquitous in our world, you know, and but it's like, when does it become like a toy or like this object versus like a packing material versus like trash? Like, what is that line and how does that work? And then also like, how does this like kind of perceived trash material work against like a more art value material or like craft value material like felt or yarn? You know, I've got like toothpicks and synthetic hair and stuff in there too, which is like another kind of question in that line of thinking. Yeah, so that just kind of brought me to like an exciting new place in my practice. This is the bottom view of that. So that's like a tufted rug and there's like kind of sculptural intestinal bodily forms again. And there's like that link between the body and like space and furniture also. Yeah, and then I thought I would just share kind of like what I'm doing in my studio like right now. So I have been doing these material studies with school glue. And so I'm using like just like normal, you know, Elmer's school glue and pouring it on like a smooth surface, like a piece of granite or like a metal table, whatever. And then I'm like adding color to it and kind of like painting with it, either like with a brush or like a paint mixer, and adding additional texture, and then also using the glue as like kind of resin material to hold other materials. So there's like dirt and hair and like rope in it, and then I let it dry and then I pull it, and then there's like this glue skin that I can then work with as like fiber material, like it acts like fabric, so you can sew with it. And then like, this is, my studio is like really messy, so please excuse that. But yeah, this is like that glue in a more like sculptural form and like how that's like living in a spatial context. And yeah, I'm working with this idea. It's like a new idea about like ecology of lore. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to currently. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sevaan. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So our third place award winner is Emily Keown for her piece Pink One Sage. And sadly, Emily cannot be with us live today. She has jury duty. So we'll hear from her via recording. So Emily is a practicing fiber artist, teacher, student, and community leader. And she's also a mom of twin girls who is inspired by girls, art, collaboration, and the community. She is a maker, a storyteller, a dreamer, who cannot help but want to draw a memory, a conversation, a scene. To her, it is a need like breath. She loses herself in tactile piles and lets the materials lead her to an answer. So we will be hearing from Emily as she provides her comments. She was very excited to share with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Cowan.
All right. One moment while we restart.
Sorry, just one moment.
Sure, no worries. And just a reminder to everyone, we will have a brief Q&A at the end of the session. So if you do have questions for the presenters we've heard from, please put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Thanks.
Present with you guys, but it sort of just goes with maybe what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes. So I am someone who has never, ever stopped being a student. The work that's in the show currently is from some of my newer body of work, which are weavings that are they're done on the loom, and a lot of stuff is added into them, and then they're embellished on top of after they come off of the loom. And I have a whole lot of elements I put into it, lots of stuff that's just sort of crap left over from my kids and life in general and all the plastic stuff we get. And then there are some things that are kind of like ribbons and other pieces of things that are collected that are added into them. But really my journey started after I finished school, and then I went back to school, and I finished school, and then I went back to school because I loved being a student. And I felt like it was kind of the only time I was able to really take time for myself and to create work. I'm a mom, and I have twin girls who are almost 11 years old. And I would say when my girls were born is kind of when my journey of creating a student space for myself started, because I found myself constantly just in the role of domestic duties, cleaning, doing laundry and things like that. And now that my kids are a little older and they have some more independence, which is sort of negotiable, how much independence they really have, as you can see from this drawing, I have been able to really think about what kind of an artist I want to be and what kind of things I want to make, and more importantly, what I want to learn and and how to seek those things out. So when my kids were born, there was another artist friend of mine named Allie Rex, and she also had twins right about the same time I did. And so we started a correspondence that was pretty casual at first, but has become much more complex over the years, where we exchanged parcels of started artwork and started collaborating with each other and became really a pretty big support for each other. And it was from this relationship with Allie Rex that I realized that I needed something a little more formal. So I sought out two women who really inspired me, and I really wanted things that they had. I was interested in their career paths. I was interested in their artwork and their studio practice. So I set up a much more formal relationship with these two women, and they've become my mentors. And we have a continuing exchange where they really help push me in my space. So one of them is Jane O'Neill, and she does formal critiques with me pretty regularly. And in addition to that, will challenge me to use new materials that I haven't used before, or old materials that I haven't used in a long time. For example, Shrinky Dinks was one of her more recent challenges to me. I find that when I'm really stalled out, or when I'm having trouble giving myself time and space, if I have some sort of an assignment from someone that I really respect, that I will carve out that time and space for myself. So I've been able to find a way to continue to be a student for my whole career. The other one is Rachel Egenhofer, and she's a professor and the head of her department, and someone like whose career I really aspire to have. And she has most recently been really pushing me on my loom and with my material usage, and giving me really good questions in addition to a lot of literature to read, and things to look at, even music to listen to. And she's currently working with me and in an exchange that I'll show in my last slide. These are my pieces that I have in the show. This one was kind of the first one I did where I started working on the loom and seeing what I could add and what I could even take away from while I was working without compromising the actual structure. And then I pushed it even farther. This one involves multiple stuffed animals that have been consumed by the weaving. And from here, this is where I was really challenged, specifically by my mentors, to really take what's coming off of the loom and see how much I can actually add to it while still showing the weaving, which is where I came up with this piece, which got 3rd place. And you can see that there's kind of this mystery as to which was added into the weaving on the loom and which was added after. And here's some details. So you can see that there is an extensive amount of stuff added afterwards, the beading work. And but there's also a lot of mystery, like which parts of the ribbon were added into the loom and into the weaving. Same with the doll, how much of it was added into the weaving while it was on the loom. And it really becomes sort of this complex structure where I'm seeing how much stuff I can add into it and still be able to crank my loom forward and not completely compromise the entire warp. And then these are my last pieces that I'm working on right now, where Rachel's actually encouraging me to use a lot more natural objects and see how I can incorporate natural objects into the sort of plastic and neon colors that I've been consuming, which was thanks to having almost 11-year-old twin girls. So you can see that I'm really working and pushing and trying to see how far I can kind of push things one way, but still pull them back the other way. These are not anywhere near done. This is like the very infancy of the process. To say that, one of these pieces is finished in like a month is sort of naive. I will finish something after, a few weeks and then live with it and alter it for months and months afterwards. And it lives through lots of critiques, which I wouldn't be able to do without these wonderful women that I have brought into my life. So I encourage everyone to find that person that you really admire and has a position that you want, and reach out to them and ask them to be your mentor, because you can have some really cool relationships with them. It's been really nice for me, because one of the things that they seem to admire about me is my domesticity, so to speak, my mothering, and how I plan things out for my kids and activities I do. So I'm able to share those sorts of ideas with them, while they're able to share their studio ideas and their critiques with me. So hope everyone has a great day, and maybe I'll get to meet you one day. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to invite Sevaan and Esther and Natalie to come back on, and we will have a short discussion and answer some questions. Hello, everyone. So again, just a reminder to put your questions into the Q&A box. But to get us started, I had a question for Esther and Sevaan, and Natalie, you're welcome to join in as well. But it seems like both of you have worked in a wide variety of media and then came to fibers. So what has been the biggest draw of fibers, or what have fibers materials done for you that are different than the other materials in your practice? And you're welcome to jump in or take the moment to think. I know that's a open-ended question.
I'll go first. I guess I've always worked kind of like larger scale and have been pretty interested in sculpture, but I find that there are like a lot of rules in a lot of like areas of sculpture that I don't love. And I feel like with fibers, like you can really play and like move them in ways like, I don't know, in undergrad I took a sculpture class and it was very like metals based, and it like the processes are amazing and it's like alchemy, it's so cool, but it's like really like if you don't follow certain rules, like it's not going to come out. I don't know, I just am attracted to like the malleability and like the intuition, and yeah, it's also just like beautiful. I feel like there's so much to engage with. Yeah.
Thanks, Sevaan.
For me, I just haven't had access to good textile programs or learning spaces until my MFA at the University of New Mexico. And being in New Mexico, there's a large textiles, everyone's doing textiles. And that was really exciting and freeing. And I felt like I could finally get into a material that I've been wanting to work with. And so that's been fun.
I can also add to this too, if you'd like. I feel like textiles are so, there's like an inherent language already in them. Like there's already the like connection to the body. There's already like, they're so personal, they're so approachable, especially like soft sculpture, I feel like and just using fabric in general is like a very approachable medium. So, and it's also very, to me, I feel like it's inherently gendered. Like it's like, maybe that won't be forever. Maybe it won't always be sort of seen as this like, almost like women's work in this way. There's definitely that history of it. And especially like for me, there is that familial history of like these quilting women. So I feel like you're already touching on a lot of things that I was interested in just by using the materials, is how I see it. And also just the like nature of being able to make something with your hands, finish it yourself, and be like, not need machinery, not need a computer, not need anything except for, you know, your hands and a couple, whatever you need to do your thing. So yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, all of you. Kind of dovetailing into that, or all of you spoke a little bit on, there was a thread of value, of ideas of value running through all of your work. So we have a question from Kim Bates. How do you schedule your time and work on your art? So like that practical side of things.
I decided in order to do it, I had to live with my parents and save money. And so that's been a real game changer.
Yeah, I have 2 children right now, and I have like a husband who works at like random times. So I'm like at a weird point in my life where I don't have a lot of time, and I know that's not going to be forever, but I've like I sometimes like have to pay somebody to watch my children in order to have studio time, which makes like your studio time a lot more precious, and it changes the way that you work. But I'm like trying to value that and know that it like plays a big role in my mental sanity to be in the studio helps me mentally, and like and also it's my career and it's my work and I need to do it, but I like prioritize it, even though it feels very expensive sometimes to be paying for studio time.
I will am in a funded program, so I'm also working and teaching. And I just like kind of make it work on my stipend. It's like not pretty, like I live pretty cheaply, but yeah, it's like worth it to have so much studio time. And I feel like grad school is really about the time and the space. Like I'm sure I'll like have to bartend over the summer or something, but you just like make it work, live cheaply. Yeah.
Thank you all. That's kind of the behind the scenes that I am also always curious about with artists. So to wrap us up, Natalie, one last question for you. So, going back to your jurying of the show, as you said in your talk, your choices are subjective. So what is it with this show that you were exploring and interested in, or what criteria were you adhering to as a starting point? And that's a question from Melanie McFarland. Oh, you were, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think that, like, I mean, after you guys see the presentation of my work, it's like I'm into the playfulness aspect of soft sculpture. I'm into the humor. I'm into like the identity and the like sort of lineage of like connecting to like a higher part of who you are, but also like the personal of your like identity. And I feel like the work that I chose, a lot of it sort of touches on that in one way or another. Not all of it has the humor element. Some of it's like very serious work, visually serious, and some of it's very playful. And also I'm interested in found textiles right now, so I feel like that's probably what drew me to Emily's work, was this like this found yeah, I'll talk about why I chose the three. Like Emily's, I really liked how she chose the pieces that were in it. Like there were like baby dolls and like ribbons and these like found objects that were sort of mundane. And I liked how those were sort of incorporated in this really formal weaving. And Sevaan, like what I loved about your work, I found very striking, just like that organ piece as sort of this like connection of like the physical body, but also just I thought it was like really visually appealing in terms of like the different materials that you were using. I just think that, and the bed piece too, I feel like it like has those elements of like the person, but without being very bodily at all. And then Esther, I really loved how yours was like exploring this sort of greater identity of this culture and these like referencing this history, but also referencing this contemporary aspect of it. And I was just like immediately like, oh my God, I love that. I'd have to put, like, it's just, I also sort of worked intuitively. Like the first, having so much work that you're looking at, you just do a thumb through of like, yes, where like, you're like, okay, why? Like without thinking too hard, like just like, this is what I'm drawn to visually. And this is what and then like doing another pass of like, okay, well, what does all this stuff have in common? And is there something that I missed? You know what I mean? That sort of would fit in, or is there something that I chose that doesn't necessarily fit in with these like bigger themes that I'm seeing, connecting all of the pieces together. So yeah, I'm excited to see where everybody that applied to the show, where their work ends up and where their career takes them. But yeah, especially obviously the ones that I chose too, and these ones that I've awarded too. But they're, yeah, so much good work. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Natalie. And thank you again, Esther and Sevaan, for joining us. And thanks, Michael, for taking us through the gallery. Also, thank you to our sponsors, SDA and SAQA, for hosting us. As a reminder, Textile Talks are free weekly programs, so please do consider supporting them with a donation. That link is in the chat. The recording of today's program will be available on YouTube in the next week, so you can check there for it or check the SDA website. And next Wednesday, SAQA will be presenting a textile talk titled Growing a Grassroots Collaborative Art Project, Reflections on Ourselves. So that should be really awesome. Thank you again to all of our audience members, and we appreciate you joining us today. Take care.